those numbers came at 13.6%. I think to some, I think it will have surprised some, given the MPC stance and, of course, the fears concerning inflation. What were your general impressions of the inflation rate for September?
Yeah, by and large, the moderation in inflation was expected, even by the MPC, because they had identified the reason for the high inflation in the preceding month to be the delay in the start of the rainy season. And so it was a supply shock. And the rainy season has now arrived. So you should expect a moderation in inflation, not just in September as we have seen, but in October and in November. For the rest of the year, you should expect inflation to moderate.
Right. So when you say moderate, we're at 13.6 now. What more so now that particularly the bond market is beginning to reflect the inflation numbers, particularly on the longer end of the yield curve. I think inflation is being watched much more closely now. What are your expectations, should I say more specifically concerning inflation?
13.6 year on year. Month-on-month figures, are less alarming, and the year-to-date figure is still less than 10%. So it's only when you look at the year-on-year one that it looks scary. It looks like inflation is not dropping. If we're looking at the month-on-month on the year-on-year, there have been numbers that should raise no alarm in anybody's mind.
And let's talk a bit about the volatility in the exchange rate. Recently, over the last 2 or 3 weeks, we have seen volatility and central bank stepping in to calm the nerves of investors. What's your outlook for the Naira now, given the volatility we've seen now?
Well, the key issue is the source of the volatility of the Naira. The Naira became volatile since the demand pressure built up in the foreign exchange market since the second quarter because of global rebalancing, because of pressures of fiscal consolidation in Europe and concerns about the sustainability of the global recovery in different pockets of the world, different pressures, markets declining across the world in the second quarter. In the last few weeks, things have turned out better. In the present month, certainly, those concerns that we were worried about the time of the MPC, I believe have largely moderated. You don't have the portfolio shocks that prompted the increased demand on the exchange rate market, on the foreign exchange market. So I reasonably expect you to see a moderate, foreign exchange market in the remainder of the year.
So right now,
I don't see, Naira weakening. I see Naira stabilizing.
Okay, at about the 153 level, which we're seeing now? In
the remainder of the year. So long as the demand pressures arising from rebalancing elsewhere in the world moderate, you shouldn't have any problem with the Naira. And then the forecast for the oil price is quite favorable. So Nigeria is in a situation where we may soon see reserves resume, increasing. Reserves have declined since this year started, but in the remainder of the year, we may see reserves growing, in which case the central bank has more muscle to supply the WDAS market.
And the next MPC meeting is scheduled, if they hold it as planned, in another 2 to 3 weeks. And we saw rates coming up 25 basis points at the last meeting. Given these inflation numbers and, of course, the general state of the market right now, what are your expectations for the next MPC meeting?
Well, given moderation of inflation, I certainly don't see any need for a rate hike in the first place. And so I don't expect any further rate hike, when the next meeting holds.
Maybe any other decision or measure to keep money supply under check? Because we did note that they reintroduced the OMO as a means to check interbank.
Money supply is not a threat at the moment. Based on the latest figures released by the central bank, you are talking of M2 growing by less than the rate of inflation, which means M2 is contracting in real terms. You are talking of base money, cash, contracting in nominal terms. It's not even growing at all, it has fallen. So you don't need to, there's no liquidity, there's no evidence of any liquidity to mop up. Yeah? Well, the stock market had started, over the past couple of weeks to grow, which is good news. Beyond that market recovery, which one hopes is sustained, it's been driven largely by a combination of local news and global news. The AMCON, for example, AMCON coming into life, for example, boosts the value of some bank shares.